DC hasn't been really successful in releasing potential blockbuster movies, even though their rival studio Marvel has been giving us one massive hit after the other. The story in most of these movies is really bland for the audience. Plus, their insistence on constantly reinventing established characters can be tiring. In today's video, we'll give our best suggestions on how DC can fix their future movies, and well, the rest of the franchise. So let's dive in. Starting off at number 8 is offering consistency through all films. Where are we right now with the DC film universe? A few years after The Dark Knight Rises, we saw 2 forgettable Superman movies released. Then, the Justice League was introduced, which was completely different tonally from everything we had seen before. Not to mention a Wonder Woman movie that seemed disconnected from everything that was released. None of them really reached the bar Christopher Nolan set. Is it too much to expect a dependable time frame like the one provided in the Nolan trilogy? Regardless of your opinion of Chris Nolan, his efforts in creating films are unmatched. Marvel fanatics can argue until their heart's content, but the CGI effects will never match the real-world effects in Nolan's films. In their future films, DC has to bring its writers together, or at the very least, schedule meetings with them, until there's one singular plan that probably focus on where to go. It's unlikely that DC will be able to fix its major issues. At number 7 on the list is to ditch Zack Snyder. Although it may come out as cold-blooded, this isn't a dig at Zack Snyder personally. Clearly, the guy worked hard to get where he is, yet something is lacking from his approach. In the end, in his movies, style ultimately triumphs over substance, as you can see in each and every film he's ever made. Sure, he has given some hits in his career, but is that really enough? Why not get M. Night Shyamalan to helm Wonder Woman if that's the case? He previously had a distinctive style after all. Now that James Gunn is in charge, it seems that the Snyderverse has finally been put to dust, which is a good thing. Zack was unable to produce something with as much spirit as Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. Even after enlisting Nolan's guidance, Batman vs. Superman was terrible for a number of reasons, and Man of Steel was at best okay. Fans are trying to get the Snyderverse to continue on a streaming platform like Netflix, but we think it's time to let it die. Moving on to number 6 on the list, kick Ben Affleck to the curb. We'll acknowledge that unlike Snyder, this ice pick to the back is a little more personal. Sure, Ben Affleck has more skill on his pinky finger than most people have in their entire bodies, but will he exert too much effort as the burden of having to make everyone love me again weighs heavily on his shoulders? We can't help but think that could be the situation. Warner Brothers and DC should start planning ahead in case another Batman movie fails. It's said that Affleck will appear in the upcoming Flash movie, but we hope that this isn't a sign that he'll continue to reprise his role in whatever new DC universe that James Gunn is cooking. When even Henry isn't good enough for it, then we definitely don't think that Ben will make the cut. Following up on number 5 is to stop making this look so hard. Why does it feel like DC is making everything appear so difficult? Realistically, it ought to be simple. All of the storylines already exist thanks to decades worth of legendary comic books. DC only needs to decide on the tone they want to convey and create a script around them. Instead, the studio put in a ridiculous amount of effort to think of novel twists that no one wanted, and the results speak for themselves. It's not necessary to try to reinvent the wheel for every movie. Oh, and no more 2.5-hour Batman vs. Superman style films without first gaining our respect as viewers and inspiring a desire to see a tremendously long movie since we're already invested in the characters. Why not entice Michael Bay away from his Transformers agreement at Paramount and have him start applying his over-glossy philosophy to Superman if insanely long and drawn-out movies are the direction DC is taking? The stories already exist, and so the movies only need to convey them, as we've previously said. Hopefully, James Gunn is able to take the comic book stories and transform them into something great for the upcoming DC universe. Next at number 4 on the list is offer a story that engages an audience. A superhero film without amazing action scenes is just a chore. Action scenes are cool to watch, but it appears that the DC movies are based more on action scenes and fights between individuals than on a compelling story that sets up the moments, and that won't do. The main issue with Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman was pretty much this. When watching those films, it looks like the storyline is focused on how are we going to allow them to do battle, rather than creating a structure that enables those battles to happen naturally. It must have been evident to the writer if it was so obvious to the audience. We sincerely hope that the current writers aren't approaching the plot with the same kind of mindset. Superheroes aren't only about action, they're also about how they respond to a bad guy or nemesis, which helps them develop a compelling story that draws us into their world. DC has to start with a narrative in their next films and construct action scenes from there. Then, at number 3 on the list is we can't empathize with Superman. The question of how many times this has actually been done properly rages on, but it's traditionally been difficult to create create and produce a great Superman movie, because he provides us with everything. Some may argue that Richard Donner was the only one to do this in 1978. When we look at the whole plot of Superman, we can see that this movie was the best at helping viewers comprehend and relate to the nearly unstoppable Kryptonian. Batman is simple. He's a man with a certain set of abilities and limitless resources. Superman, though, it's difficult to be sympathetic towards an extraterrestrial from another planet with superhuman abilities who's immune to physical harm. Superman's presence undermines any storyline, so perhaps the character will function better in the Justice League movie. He was written at a time when readers could more readily suspend their disbelief. At least then, he possessed kryptonite, which is believed to be the only substance that can physically harm him, and it gave him flaws that made for intriguing stories. But those tricks are outdated these days. We're not sure whether there's a straightforward fix, but one important step to making those movies better is to make Superman more human. James Gunn plans on making a young Superman storyline, and we think that he may be able to tackle some of the issues we discussed with the character more effectively than Snyder did. At number 2, build a better DC world. WB and DC should be praised for at least trying to do this in the past. After all, they're working really quickly to develop the Justice League universe, though it seems that not all of their efforts in the past have yielded great success. We're aware that the purpose of these films is to make money, and not simply by filling cinema theaters. They also need to offer apparel, a variety of merchandise, video games, toys, and other items. But what if it turns out to be about more than that? Not to keep harping on about Christopher Nolan, but perhaps that ought to be the benchmark for Warner Brothers and DC. In the Nolan trilogy, the films weren't only made to fill theaters, they also aimed to improve the art and science of filmmaking and immerse audiences deeper than ever in the world of Batman. Even while merchandise will always be around, you can still produce some very excellent movies while you're at it. Taking up the number 1 spot on the list is stop trying to compete with Marvel. At this point, DC can't possibly compete with the volume of products offered by Mickey Mouse and Marvel working together. Simply said, it won't be happening anytime soon. The Avengers movie series, along with the characters' individual and team efforts, dominates the field of comic book movies. Even while the Marvel movies are of high quality, they still fall short, sometimes favoring aesthetics over content. The concept of quality above all else is one area in which DC might and should differentiate itself from Marvel, and the cornerstone around which they should base their films. Movies that start with excellent plots and end with the epic pursuit of a single objective. Will this still be relevant in 25 years? Or will people mock it as they did Superman 4: The Quest for Peace? These are the kind of questions that DC should be asking. If DC wants to compete in this market, they cannot afford to release mediocre films. It cannot be emphasized enough that a benchmark has been set, and that they must now take all reasonable steps to reach and even surpass that level. Finally, which of these changes does DC Studios most urgently need to implement? DC Studios contends that the DCU has to lose its reputation as a series that makes lofty promises but never keeps them. After Warner Brothers and Discovery merged, DC Studios was created to manage prospective DCU projects. Co-presidents James Gunn and Peter Safran will outline the whole franchise. James Gunn said that they'll soon tell you about the DCU's incredibly ambitious intentions. He described it as the greatest story ever told. The new DCU is planned to cover several movies, TV shows, and animated projects. Although James Gunn's plans for DC Studios are still mostly unknown, they aren't the only things that need to be done for the DCU. Undoing the harm done to the universe by old Warner Brothers management is equally crucial and has inspired speculations of a complete reset under DC Studios. This is especially true considering the history of unrealized or otherwise abandoned plans. The studio's hasty decision to recreate Justice League at the last minute had an influence on the whole series, and that decision is the root of everything. That's a wrap for this video. Do you agree with our suggestions? Comment below, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.